guys, welcome to Black Angus Reviews. Happy Sunday. I'm prefacing this video. It is an interview from 2019 I did with the channel called Radiant Damage Podcast. It appears they haven't uploaded in 9 months. I don't know what happened, but they privated this video, which I thought was weird because even if their viewpoints are typical SJW stuff, they were willing to talk. At least Paladin Ashley was. So I don't really know what's up with that. Maybe they just don't want Fandom Association, even though they were talking about it, and that's why I found them. And just want to give, one member's viewpoint about what I see the kind of collective consciousness to be, or my view of it, and clear some things up, because there's definitely some istism-phobe sentiment from their stream about the Menace, and I wanted to give perspective. So I will let y'all see about this. The main thing is I wanted y'all to kind of digest my predictions about the Menace and some of the perspectives I have, and you can kind of see that with me being a reviewer, commentator, and writing a comic right now for Comicsgate. So enjoy. Let me know what you think in the comments, and talk to y'all later.
Hey guys, Paladin Ashley here. Thank you so much for watching. Seriously, it means the world to us. We really appreciate you. If you subscribed to become knighted in our medieval army, we really appreciate that so much. You cannot even imagine how much we appreciate your efforts joining ours in this army. And so what I wanted to add just before you watch the interview is just, again, to emphasize there were a lot of things said in this interview, and you might have been wondering, because I am a feminist and a very proud social justice warrior, why I didn't speak up and say, hey, that's wrong, or hey, I don't like that, or just any of those things, why I didn't just, speak out. It was a very open forum, okay? Black Angus welcomed discourse, okay, but I personally did not want to have a discourse this time around. I wanted it specifically to be an interview. I wanted to learn. I did occasionally share a few opinions of my own, and but most of the time you'll notice that I did not say anything. I didn't say what I believe, which, on almost every level was the opposite of what the Fandom Menace believes and what Black Angus himself believes, and that's okay, and I don't see him as less of a human being. I'm not going to cancel anybody. I'm not going to call for the cancellation of anyone. This is, again, just to reiterate the fact that we on the Radiant Damage Podcast do not believe in cancel culture. We do not believe in cancel culture. We don't believe in, dehumanizing someone because they have differing views from us. And I think personally that the way to fight against toxicity is to treat each other like human beings and to allow them to talk it out, to talk about why they're feeling this way, and sometimes just be a listening ear. I did not want to make anybody feel attacked. I didn't want to make him feel like he needed to go on the defensive when I was interviewing him. And so just so that y'all know that before you watch this interview. So thank you all so much for watching. Bye.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And today with me I have...
Yeah, I'm Black Angus.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this interview. So if you're ready for it, we can just jump straight into these questions.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Okay. So the first question I have for you is, when did you first join the Fandom Menace, and what first drew you to the group?
Yeah, I'll kind of give you a little backstory. So I'm not sure how much you look into this Star Wars news coverage, but Mike Zero is a name that comes up sometimes. He is kind of a big fake news guy in the sense, after Last Jedi, people realized all these theories. He was putting out all these 5 videos a day of snippets of Reddit stuff. Nothing happened in the movie. But before that, leading into Force Awakens, before I ever really followed anything on YouTube, I knew trailers were there. I wasn't into that part of the internet. He was referenced every day on news articles about Star Wars. So then I'll just go to the source. And so I'd
Right.
never subbed to him. I didn't know about that, but I followed, and eventually I got into movie reviews, and
Mhm.
I started seeing stuff being weird with The Last Jedi. But right before Last Jedi came out, there was a spoiler video by the World Class Bullshitters, one of the, like the big three of the Fandom Menace, Jeff Hicks, and I was like, no way, this can't be. And it was all true, every single bullet point. And
Mhm.
for whatever reason, I kept clicking on. I kept going back. I didn't understand a lot of their dialogue, especially about comics with Spider-Man and stuff. But
Yeah.
it just felt like bros hanging out. It felt genuine,
Mhm.
regardless of their sub count. And so then,
Mhm.
like, they're the epicenter of the Phantom Menace and a lot of Comicsgate notoriety. So
Okay.
that's where it all started for me.
Gotcha. So if you're ready, we'll go into question number two. So question number two is, as far as I read, the Fandom Menace's manifesto states that the group aims to protect the Star Wars franchise from divisive political agendas. Do you personally believe that the franchise is in danger of divisive political agendas?
Yeah, I think it's kind of not the epicenter, but it is the focal point. Nothing resonates, nothing has such a ripple effect across the whole series or something as Star Wars, because it's one linear story. Even if you have tangents like Rogue One or Solo, it's all
Mm-hmm.
feeds back into one stream. Marvel, you got all these iterations. You can reboot anybody. You can't reboot Luke Skywalker or Anakin or
Gotcha.
so it's just when you make a decision with the characters, it's just stamped unless they made an alternate timeline, and then that would cause ire because you don't have alternate timelines.
Right.
But I,
Mm-hmm.
I, I definitely think something's there. I think it could be blown out of proportion here and there, or outrage is used for clicks or something. But there's a core for sure that rings true, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Well, that being the case, what do you believe is like the individual or organization that could be responsible for inciting these political agendas?
Um, yeah, that's the thing. I don't put a finger on it. Like with my
Yeah.
stance with Disney and stuff, it's more about their treatment of fans in general. The Ollie
Mm-hmm.
story, the child with the Spider-Man tombstone. I talk to the father here and there, so it just
Mm-hmm.
really bothers me. So that's more my stance with Disney, more so than like
Yeah.
they did a bad movie or
Mm-hmm.
agenda. But it's across Hollywood, generally speaking. Now you got stuff like Cinestate that's kind of like Comicsgate. That's an actual company trying to kind of do the same idea of being escapism.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's no like. I guess it's the Illuminati of film or entertainment, if you will. Just I have no name for it. It's
Right.
just
Okay.
kind of
Gotcha.
the leftist elitism or whatever.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So number four, that was number three, by the way, just so that if you're following along, you can.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
I
yeah.
printed it
Okay.
off.
Cool. Oh, awesome. Great. I hope that's helpful. Okay, great. So number four is what does the fandom menace believe is to be gained from diminishing the presence of, let's say, just throwing this out there for my personal perspective on it, it's usually that they're frustrated at the diminishing of men and specifically white men in the forefront. So if that seems to be kind of the agenda of this political entity, what do you think the Fandom Menace believes is to be gained from that incitement, from that agenda?
Yeah, that's what puzzles me. I've kind of come around to finding it like I'm trying to figure out how to put this to words concisely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, take your
And
time.
this will come up again throughout this, I
Mm-hmm.
think. But I really think the figurative SJW, entity
Mm-hmm.
or amoeba, whatever you want to call it, we doubted the intelligence in general. We think, oh, they just want to do divisive identity politics to virtue signal. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
it's a front. Because now it's like when you have these conversations, it's like I don't hate women, I don't like X character, and you have to preface that because the culture we're in, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's purposeful because you get everyone triggered about a genuine divisive just identity politics like diversity hire. or bait and switch, whatever. And then they get an actual good actor, actress. There's no actual agenda, but you're so ingrained in this following of like watchdogging everything that then you're like, that's
Right.
woke. There's a gay person, they're woke. And then it turns the shotgun on you like Tom and Jerry, and it's like, now you look like the bigot because you've just been reactionary. That's what I'm very much cautious of. But
Right.
I don't know what's to be gained. Like, definitely not monetarily. You've seen it with Charlie's Angels for sure. Flops when
Oh
they
yeah.
push this stuff. And I think that's the weird thing is you've seen it with Gillette as well, with their campaigns with like the trans
Yeah.
stuff, which just alienates mainly male customers, and then the like toxic masculinity. They lost $8 billion in that deal pushing that. So I don't know what they're gaining. It's an agenda.
Right.
It's an ideal. I can commend them for sticking to it, but I don't know what's to gain exactly from it.
Is there anything that maybe you think might be to gain from it? I mean, if you could kind of like, if you could guess, just totally, this is totally off the cuff, by the way. So
yeah,
I didn't have this, I'm just curious.
There's that sentiment you see like kind of. I talk in like extremes and analogies, so it's like I'm not generalizing the world with this, but it's an example. You got like Antifa or something, where and stuff where it's like America was never great and this and that, and the toxic white patriarchy, white male privilege, this and that. They're even making classes about angry white males, and it's like, what, I would. Yeah, that's a tough one. Trying to encapsulate it.
Right.
Could you maybe rephrase the question? That might help me.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So if you could like put yourself in the shoes of this political other side, basically, that is essentially inciting their agendas in Star Wars and Disney and all of that in media. What do you think they could gain from that? What do you think could be their goal, if you could guess?
I think it's a vendetta. They've used kind of like Marxist ideals of oppressor and oppressee, and that's like the end state of the world. You're either oppressed or you're an oppressee, and that's what I was bringing up, like the white male stuff, is that they've idealized white, straight, and male, usually all together in one, as the culprit.
Right.
They're the hoarder. They're the Smaug of all the gold and treasure, and they've generated this very vindictive mindset in anyone that's not those demographics, and they happen to be poor or in a bad state. Then it's like, well, it's not your fault. It's because white people, mainly white males, and I guess with that ideal, they want to, tip the scales. But I'm very cautious. I love Planet of the Apes, 68 especially, and people don't realize the bigger story behind it. It is a great civil rights kind of parallel or subtext, but the bigger story is about the pendulum of power, because it's like what happens when like X oppressor becomes a minority now, an oppressee, and then the oppressees are now the oppressed. It switches. There's never really any equilibrium, and so that's how I see everything.
Yeah, definitely there is, I think, ideology. I can certainly agree that there's an idealist society that maybe isn't as realistic for either side of the debate. There's a perfect world, in our minds, right, of what the perfect society would look like. And in reality, that won't ever come to fruition. So that much for sure is definitely fantasy. Okay, so that being said, number 6, I think you kind of answered it a little bit because you mentioned media in general, but do you believe that Star Wars is the only franchise that is being targeted by this political agenda?
No. I wrote down a couple. One will probably throw you for a loop. So Ghostbusters 2016, especially, it's resurfaced, I think, twice in the media with coverage, or like, oh, the toxic troll, white males, whatever. They try to belittle just the fans and say they're all one group.
Mhm.
It flopped. It was one of the biggest flops in box office, and then
Yeah.
recently, after the whole like trying to guilt the audience of being bigots or misogynist with Paul Feig in the ranks as well. Then you had Leslie Jones recently say something like, "Oh, Ghostbusters 3, oh, you sound like Trump or something." It's like, what? Where did that come from?
Mhm.
Just trying to generate anything. So you got Ghostbusters,
Right.
Batwoman, in the way they market
Mhm.
it, where it's like, none of us reading comics are afraid to read a lesbian Batwoman. But
Mhm.
there's a way to
Right.
sell it to men. It's like Ruby
Mhm.
Rose from John Wick with an attractive black girlfriend. That should like get guys and young men, teenage boys in high
Right.
school, like their eyes glued to like wait for that steamy moment. But it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I don't need men, and it's like you're literally wearing everything of a man. You're taking his image, but then you're disdainful of him. But
Mhm.
the one for sure that I think no one talks about is Zootopia, and that's before
Mm.
Force Awakens. Um, it really irritates me because it came out during like the big push of Black Lives Matters with like
Mhm.
Ferguson and all that, maybe
Yeah.
Baltimore, and it tells this kind of police narrative from the cops' perspective mainly of like
Mhm.
this setup where predators are kind of in the position of blacks or minorities, and the
Mhm.
girl's this idealistic cop who doesn't realize profiling is bad or whatever. But you have it set up where this group has evolved so far that their base instincts of like predation are null and void, but someone's doctoring them to like go back to that. So they
Mhm.
actually have a reason to profile predators. So you're only justifying the like parallel of profiling blacks or whoever is
Mhm.
the you know. So it ate its own foot, with that movie. But
Mhm.
I saw what they're trying to do, and
Yeah.
so they do it in children's movies too,
Oh, for
or
sure.
there's that
Yeah.
potential. They're not above it.
Right. Mhm. Gotcha. Okay, so just maybe media in general, or primarily Disney, would you say?
I wouldn't say primarily. There's been other things that I just can't recall, but largely
Right.
largely yeah, Disney does get the focus.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So number seven is ultimately what damage does the group, and you don't have to speak for the group. I know you're saying you said earlier before the interview that you're individuals, and that's great. I'd rather speak to an individual anyway rather than an ambassador. You know what I mean? Um, so I just in your opinion though, from what you understand from the inside of the group, what do you think that the group the Fandom Menace believes is being done to the franchise by adding more, minorities or diminishing the presence of men from the forefront of the material
Um,
of
yeah,
Star
no,
Wars
I'm glad.
specifically.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm glad you prefaced with the yeah. I was going to address the manifesto thing. Like, there's no actual
Right.
written out. Like, I'm friends with the author of the Phantom Menace book project, but even he's not like
Okay.
the guy. He's just an historian.
Right.
Um,
Gotcha.
I don't think there is a problem necessarily with like none of us in Star Wars that I've seen in the Menace have a problem with minorities.
Mm-hmm.
I was excited watching Rey in Episode 7. I loved Finn. Oscar Isaac, I like him, but he sucks as Poe. They just didn't write. He was supposed to die in that movie, so he's just been
Mm-hmm.
drug along because Oscar asked to.
Oh,
But
gotcha.
yeah, like with minorities, like I have no problem. It's all about how you use it. Like a parallel with like Black Panther. I love Black Panther
Oh,
in
yeah.
Civil War, and then in the
Fantastic.
movie that they gave him, they totally ran a different way that made him not endearing. But sticking with Star Wars, it doesn't seem to be a problem. It's about how you do it. Like when you
Mm-hmm.
interject like the Holdo character, who's a white
Mm-hmm.
person, but you make this subtle feminist, like workplace allegory, and it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
why is this in here? Like we're here to like escape all the crazy stuff on the
Gotcha.
news and on the internet.
Mm-hmm. So number eight is could it be possible that there is no agenda or entity, like just like hypothetically, to replace or diminish men in media as a whole in an effort to elevate minorities and women? If that is the case, what possible reason could there be for the influx in the presence of minorities in media?
Um, just rereading it just to really like soak it up.
Yeah, you're good. Go for it.
I I definitely think, it's like I try to be self-reflective. If you've seen my content, I kind of with just Rise of Skywalker by itself, I'm like all over the place because like, oh, they did this, and I'm like, that's awesome. So,
Right. Yeah.
I try to be all encompassing and not just pick one spot.
Right.
Um, I could I could go along with that line of thought that there is no agenda or something. It's just, oh, they just wanted to cast them. I think that is the case maybe for the casting agents or something that pick these people, but
Right.
it seems very clear, like right from the get-go with Force Awakens, and I've said this before. This should have been the warning side.
Right.
Finn from Episode 7,
Mm-hmm.
he, it's like there's a black stormtrooper. It's like what? Because the Empire is a Nazi allegory, and they were
Mm-hmm.
clearly white. That was the whole idea of Palpatine and stuff. Is white nationalism, whatever allegory.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, they were clones of a New Zealander. So it's like, how is there a black trooper? What? Like, that's
Right.
just shocking. And his reaction was, get used to it. And the media's like, no, racist bigots. And that was like the first, like, before we were aware, because we were all like, woo, Star Wars is back. Oh, some people had questions. I did too, but I'm not racist. And we just kind of let it go. It wasn't until Ghostbusters 16 and Trump that year with the election
Mm-hmm.
that this just blew up.
Yeah, gotcha. So like you feel like the media kind of maybe fueled the start of the movement.
Yeah, they definitely fueled a divide that was kind of no one, like you got Underworld, which is a series led by a woman with Kate Beckinsale before in her prequel with a different actress.
Mhm.
Guys like Doomsday, which is a woman.
Right.
There's other shows where it's like they're not the lead, but they're not the lead, but they are a lead, where it's like a woman warrior. Alien, of course, Sarah Connor. I've watched Terminator 2, and I'm like, I don't see the big deal about Connor. She's just a character. That's how I grew up. Me personally,
Hmm.
I don't
Right.
like to think of, I like this female character. I never watched Game of Thrones and thought, I love Daenerys because she's a woman, or I love Tyrion
Hmm.
because he's handicapped being a dwarf, or I like the
Right.
part 'cause
Yeah.
he's black. It's
Hmm.
just good characters, and that's what really throws me for a loop with this whole need for discussing this stuff. It's like, why aren't we just talking good or bad characters? It
Right.
becomes a like, you don't like them because they're a woman, or you don't like them because they're black, and it's like, what? Like,
One of my colleagues actually said he's not impressed with the characters in the new trilogy either. Like he's not just going along with it, and he's very much not necessarily against what they're doing with Star Wars, but he just was not impressed. He was very much just meh, kind of thing. So not really a huge reaction, but
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
even outside of identity politics, you got, like I said, the feminist. That can kind of be identity politics, but you have that with like
Mhm.
the workplace situation for no reason. Because like you should be working together in that scenario,
Mhm.
and then you have the whole Canto Bite sequence in episode 8, where it's like this kind of PETA thing, where it's like horse racing's bad, and then but at the expense of slave children, where it's like your wires are crossed, and then it's like capitalism is bad, yet we bought Fox for $71 billion. Don't look over
Right.
here. And it's like,
Yeah.
what kind of message are you trying to tell me? It's like, it's disingenuous. You're not a company that
Right.
just throws money at Mother Teresa or something, you know?
Right. Yeah. For sure. For sure. Um, okay. Let's see. I think you kind of answered this already previously, but number 9 is it possible for a creator to simply wish to create a story based around a minority purely as a creative concept without like a political motivation involved?
Yeah. No, I've talked about this because I'm also in Comics Skate, and this with like writing
Hmm.
characters gets a little more in depth of like thought. I think, at least for Elseworld stories, telling a gay Captain America story in World War II. That'd be very interesting if you
Mm.
actually made that purposeful. Because think about what it'd be like to be a symbol of America as a man in
Hmm.
war and stuff. You're macho, but you're a wussy in the general public's view if they knew about you,
Mm.
because you're gay,
Right.
you're
Okay.
effeminate, and
Right.
having to closet yourself. That's something most people on my side are like, "What? Screw that!" But I'm like, that'd be interesting because you would
Yeah.
make sex, like the identity, purposeful for conflict, versus something like Miles Morales. He's Black Spider-Man in an alternate universe,
Mhm.
but when I read it, it's just Peter Parker. It's like they
Right.
didn't make him being black and Puerto Rican or Hispanic, whatever, part of like being different from Parker. And so
Right.
it becomes disingenuous where it's like, what was the point of Black Spider-Man? This
Mm.
didn't help the story, didn't change the story.
Gotcha.
Um, I always cite, and it's like people, the like I said, the idealistic, SJW, like that image in your head. They like to virtue signal about like Black Panther. There was some weirdo who tweeted like, I went to saw Black Panther and I just stared at like the black kids behind me the whole time and saw their enjoyment. It's like, that's creepy. But it's virtue signaling. It's like some white guy saying like, it was so great seeing kids happy because they saw a black person on screen. And it's like, that's weird.
Mhm.
They virtue signal us, but
Mhm.
they don't go see stuff that actually matters, like Brokeback Mountain, where the identity
Mm.
matters, or
Mhm.
Moonlight, or Single Man, or
Mm.
Fighting with My Family was a recent one
Oh, that
with
was
old
a great
Captain
movie.
Marvel. Alita,
Mhm.
so yeah, yeah, exactly. I saw that movie and I'm
Mm.
like, I want my daughter to see this when she can understand it. This is
Yeah.
like empowering for women without being in my face about any of it. It was just
Mm.
natural.
Gotcha.
Versus Captain Marvel, where it's like, this is a feminist film. It's like, what? You're a
Mm.
cartoon from some old Jewish guy in the 60s. Like, slow your
Gotcha.
roll.
Yeah. I gotcha. Okay. Okay, so given that the fandom menace often decries what they believe to be damaging to the Star Wars franchise, this, at least to me, infers that there is a kind of like a standard formula for the Star Wars movies. So if the franchise were to deviate from that, then it would kind of damage the franchise. So if that's the case, then what would you consider the Star Wars formula? Like what would be the franchise remaining faithful to itself?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest thing I talk about. Like, despite all the political stuff that comes
Mhm.
up from just tearing the
Right.
movie apart,
Mhm.
of Episode 8, the biggest sins were just like this question: what makes Star Wars? There's a difference between the prequels and original in the sense of one is character stories and the other is world stories. But ultimately, they both intertwine so well, not just because of a few characters that are tied together, but because, like I was saying earlier, Joseph Campbell helped make at least the first Star Wars, if not impress upon Lucas the hero's journey. He did all these Jungian studies of storytelling and religion and stuff, notice trends and stuff, and that's how you get the classic storytelling circle of the hero's journey, where it's like the certain points, more in depth than just the three acts. And
Mhm.
it seems every hero across the world really follows this formula. It must be inherent to humanity to tell these stories. And so, giving that example, Star Wars is a universal story. Like, the Jedi are very much monastic, like Western Christian monks, but also Tibetan or like Buddhist monks. There's samurai. Um,
Mhm.
there's
They
like
are.
Arabic. Yeah, there's Arabic hints. Ultimately, the Force itself, like, I'm an atheist now, but I grew up
Mhm.
Christian. I can see how the Force, my perception of that ideal, uh, aids looking at the world from my perspective of like, there's probably no God at all, versus like the hardcore Christian, the Muslim, the Buddhist, the Jew, whatever. It's very Taoistic. It's very
Mhm.
Eastern for that element of Star Wars. But there's so much humanity all encompassed with mythology, religion, and history that it is a
Mhm.
all world, all time story for humanity. It's why it'll
Right.
last so long. And so when you put these in the moment politics,
Mm.
or discussions that aren't being written to question which side's right, like Dark Knight and terrorism or something.
Mm.
When you make it like
Mhm.
this is the way and these are the bigots, you limit
Right.
yourself, and this movie will be looked at as like, what were they doing with political messaging? It wasn't subtle. It
Mm.
wasn't Planet of the Apes where it would last.
Mhm. Right. Gotcha. I think that's a good answer. As far as like, what makes Star Wars great, I think that's such a great like response because it really does. have something for everyone, I think. And that is what makes it so relatable just across the globe. I think that's really beautiful. So number 11 is, and this is for sure, a hot
Yeah.
subject, I know, but do you agree with the actions of certain Fandom Menace members in their actions against actors and actresses in The Last Jedi for taking part in that movie? One such example was Kelly Marie Tran being kind of bullied off of social media.
Yeah. Some people are going to see this and think, "Oh, he's reading the narrative for his side." It's not the case. Um, just like we're kind of tangentially related to like the Stan with Vic crowd and the Weeb Wars stuff. Like I was talking to you, I believe in like that right of defense, at least to like clear your name, not be smeared. Um, with Kelly Marie Tran, this kind of ties with like narratives from the media. She's a Vietnamese American woman. All right. And then her character sucks. And so people might find her on social media like, screw you, your character sucks. All right. From what I know, I've heard nothing that sounds anything like what Jake Lloyd, a little kid, got from Phantom Menace, or Ahmad Best, a black guy, for playing a racist black character. Or Daisy Ridley. This is the real parallel. Daisy Ridley left social media, and everyone tried to make a spin about it, but she actually came out maybe before Disney had the idea of spinning something this way. And she's like, I just couldn't take all the attention. I just needed to get away from social media. It was taking up too much of my life. And for one, there's no proof. That's why I brought up the Stand With Vic stuff. There's no proof in the sense of like, where are these like threats of violence or crossing the line with vitriol about your character. They've never shown it. She deleted everything, so there's nothing to see. That's her own fault. But also recently on the Rise of Skywalker promotion tour, she was on Good Morning America, and did you see that clip?
I did, actually, yes.
Yeah, okay, so I think this is very damning. You look at body language and like what was the focus of her talk. She skimmed over the like bullying or whatever, and that could just give her the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, that's just like a known thing. She's addressed it for like a year now. She's focused on another point of like being an aid to women or people by saying, well, I was a day-to-day worker, a common person trying to act, and then I get Star Wars. And she hinted at that like it blew up, for her before the movie came out, where it's just so much attention. It was overwhelming. She had to deal with a lot of I would say anxiety about it, adjustment. That's what I think all of her leaving social media was. I think from everything we put together, it was like Daisy Ridley. But because there's no proof, it's open to interpretation. But with everything we've seen from Disney and the media, it seems like a just course to assume, at least currently, this is just a narrative because she's a woman and or Asian, and it fits the bill to be like the bigots chased her off of Instagram or whatever site.
Gotcha. Okay. So number 12 is in 2018, a USC report uncovered the use of trolls to incite more than half of the hostility within the Star Wars fandom towards The Last Jedi that same year. So what are your thoughts on the effects of artificial accounts? Like, we don't necessarily have to go into that report, but what are your thoughts on just the effects of artificial accounts to stir up political discord within the community?
I mean, this goes back. There's always, I would say, sabotage of your opponent if you got money to do it. So it's nothing really new. I don't want to blackball Disney or Hollywood as like a lone suspect in time, but it's kind of gotten to where it's like beyond fairness of cheating or eschewing stuff, if that makes sense. They did this with Spider-Man, where it wasn't necessarily political. It was just Spider-Man. The deal didn't go through with Marvel, so he's going back to Sony completely. And then it turns out Data Eraser 117, shout out, buddy, if you ever see this, he does Twitter research, essentially compiles all this proof of whatever the discussion is, and it's very damning. And he found so many accounts sharing the same exact verbiage. Supposed to be different people, but they were bots. and it was all like, screw Sony, make the Disney deal work with Spider-Man, something to that effect. And so he uncovered a just like that Russian bot study or whatever, which associate of mine, Seth Kryptoni, he actually interviewed that guy, and I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but I'll link it to you later if you ever wanted to cover that later, just for a video.
Sure.
But it seems like that study is actually kind of like, it wasn't actually that conclusive. Other people, I think, have disproven it, or, because it was a Russian bot study, and it's like, we've been going at this for 2 years now for the movie. It's not Russian bots.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, number 13, if someone were to disagree with the Fandom Menace formula for what should or should not be included in Star Wars media, would you inherently, or perhaps maybe a colleague in the Fandom Menace, consider their stance to be politically motivated? Or is that sort of, just a case-by-case individual basis?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be case by case. Demographics would play a part depending on what the topic was. If you're a black guy or a white woman or whatever entity, you're gay or whatever, that could totally not come into account. Or it could very well come to the forefront. It's like, well, of course, this and that and that and this with the discussion. But yeah, I would need an example before I would, even guess at what we collectively would kind of assume.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, let's see. So then we'll just move on to number 14. When seeing minorities on the screen within the latest trilogy, just hypothetically, a white male member of the Fandom Menace could suddenly feel as though they're being forgotten by media or kind of pushed to the side. If you can relate to this feeling at all, is it possible that the first 2 trilogies might have left a minority feeling kind of similarly forgotten by the media or pushed to the side by media?
I think it's definitely something people could feel as far as the minorities feeling left out.
Right.
But for one, I think you write what you know generally. Now, if you're in, say, the Army, you might have the ability as like a white guy from 1960s Alabama. You might have the insight to write for at least for one character, a black guy from Chicago, and be spot on more so than that black guy's colleagues because you were in the shit, you were in the foxhole with that guy or whatever. You broke those bonds. But generally, we cluster with our own groups. Just subconsciously don't really think about it, Animals like sameness were animals, and that just kind of, you see it in demographics, whether it's by economic situation or just let people associate where they want. People kind of go with their people, whether it's religion or more likely race, because there's similarities with culture. I think Lucas wrote white people because I think Luke Skywalker and Han were bits of himself put in into a book and then, or put into word and then film.
Yeah, I could see that.
So yeah, it's like, maybe he didn't grow up with a lot of black people, and so then it's like, well, now he's more educated, or he's more lived the life. It's like, hey, you know what? We need a black guy. Let's get Lando. We need a woman. Let's add Mothma with Carrie. Things like that. You just become aware, and you see it in the prequels where it's diverse, not just humanity but creatures. And that's how I am. Like, I was one thing I brought with Consecate, reason why is one of the characters is going to be a mixed girl. It's not because I'm mixed. It's just I want her to be like racially ambiguous, so the most amount of guys could want her pinup because she's ambiguous, But generally, I grew up white, I guess, even though I'm mixed and stuff. I could, so I guess inherently I would write white or whatever, but let me look this over again real quick, make sure I'm missing something. Relating to the feeling, the minority stuff, like, yeah, again, I think more so it's about culture. I've planned for like a year to write this video about black film. And what I've noticed is something I think very damning and reflecting on a general black culture. The biggest black-led films are, pretty good. They're pretty well ingrained in American culture. Eddie Murphy, Will Smith, and stuff. They're funny or action generally, or drama in the sense where it's not like a ghetto or civil rights drama.
Mhm.
The best critical movies, though, Oscar bait, are always in the ghetto or poverty, civil rights, slavery. Those are like the Oscar
Right.
bait. Those are the critically acclaimed. And so, it's like, it's weird because Whitey, if you will, he's got all of European history of medieval stuff, whether it's
Mhm.
historic or fantasy. He's got Greek stuff, Roman stuff, um, pagan stuff, Vikings. There's a whole
Yeah.
lore of fiction to write from because
Mhm.
whatever bad stuff white people have dealt with in history is just across time. They have stories to tell of their culture,
Right.
and Africa is mainly black. But it's weird that none of it has crossed over to America or
Mhm.
resurfaced through the internet of like, hey, let's tell black fantasy. Let's get like our forefathers fantastical stories, their mythology, and make
Mhm.
like something. So I think it comes down to culture in a way that black people
Right.
are sold films about like along with what I said, like Fast and Furious, that type of stuff, Street Fighter or
Mhm.
whatever. There's still very like base carnal stuff like R. Kelly, dramas, like BT type of um, programming, and so I think that's the big difference. For whatever reason, you see it in schooling and stuff, like what would like white people are more prone to go to like English class and therefore be critics. It kind of goes back to like what Brie Larson talked about, where it's like you're not taking into account what people are acculturated to go to school for. And I
Mhm.
think that reflects a lot on minorities feeling left out. I think that's valid to like be cognizant of if you can, but if you don't know enough, then like I can't write about Chinese people because I've not been around enough
Mhm.
to like respect them. But that's the thing with
Right. Yeah.
to kind of in this Lucas. I think even though he made it with like what American and British white people generally,
Mhm.
he had a very, I would say, fetishized view of the East, of
Mhm.
Kurosawa and stuff, and their culture
Right.
and their religions.
Absolutely.
He was paying respect. So I think there's a
Mhm.
fuller context than just the skin on the screen.
Mm, for sure. Number 15. So if you can, relate to that feeling of sort of, maybe the first two trilogies, maybe leaving a minority feeling similarly forgotten. It is possible for sure for one looking at the screen, looking at what's being fed to them, just kind of like where is the person that looks like me, you know. If that is something that you can kind of relate to in any way, even just from an outsider's perspective, is that something that should be addressed? And what would you personally suggest as a potential solution in media?
I I understand like Star Trek's a great example with the
Mm,
interracial kiss.
for
In
sure.
the time it came out, that was
Hmm.
like it was a very
Oh yeah.
forceful move, and it's
Mm,
crazy that the media allowed it. But they probably like, you know what, we're gonna get a bunch of shit, but people are gonna keep watching because this is a hit. They're just gonna like
mhm.
hate watch our show and be like, oh, hopefully the black lady gets killed, whatever the case was back then.
Oh yeah.
um, I understand that kind of incentive, that
Mm,
kind of affirmative action type of moves, but
right.
generally culture has to fix itself. Um,
Mm,
Larry, I think his name is Elder. He's this like black conservative. I don't know him a lot, but he gave us example of like black
mm,
people in Chicago didn't go to Little Italy and eat Italian food because they hate blacks. Eventually, there's too many black people. They want our money, so they kind of
mhm,
adjust how they treat us just for economic sake.
mm,
In the same way, it's like I think it's nice that there's the kind of ambassador take of like the white knights for whatever minority. um,
right.
I think it's a good incentive they have to try to
Mm,
be like, oh, let me step aside and help you. Um, but ultimately, it's like whatever minority, they need to help themselves. They need to legitimize themselves.
mm,
Um, so I think the ownership for whatever minority feels left out. What are they missing in school or at home to go forward. You know, like I use the bike example a lot because it's like there's just all the stats to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
with the prison and all that and the crime and profiling, all this stuff
Right.
intertwined,
Oh yeah.
families and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
disparity with like fathers in the home, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that makes a big difference versus I would say like Asians' potential of changing media with you know, they're a lot more stable as a culture, as a group. If you're looking at a group effort, um, uh, I don't know, like I just really think it's a lot of self ownership. It's nice to try to help your minority friend, but it's ultimately like they gotta like throw elbows and do it themselves if
Mm.
they want to sustain. Because then it's like I was, you know, I'm a veteran. So when I was in
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan, we were leaving. We were trying to prop them up, but it's not really sustainable because we
Right.
gave them all of the equipment. They don't have fuel. They can't afford to fuel up the Humvees that we gave them. So we're just crippling them in the long run. As soon as we
Right.
left, they all got raided and taken out. And then there's a parallel to what, at least how I view this situation, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
you gotta teach them the tools to sustain themselves, and it might take 100 years versus like what white people have done with film, generally speaking. You know, but you got people like Ang Lee, you got the he's got like a Japanese sounding name, the black gentleman who did the couple episodes of Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing outing so far. So I mean,
Right.
that's how you break out. Deborah Cho. That's how you break out. Is you just do your work. You don't worry about the
Mm-hmm.
minority stuff until you're established
Right.
and make your headway.
Okay, well, in that vein, again, off the cuff, just because I'm curious. So, if, let's say, but if there is systemic racism kind of keeping a glass ceiling, above maybe the minorities who are trying to break into the industry, but if there is something sort of hindering that, like maybe because this is a predominantly white society, let's say America, just as an example, so just using America as an example, is there maybe another potential solution, or is that possibly, something that would hinder that effect? Like if that might actually be why there's not a whole lot of, minorities in media at the moment.
Um, I don't know if there is a solution. I don't know if there's
Yeah.
something systemic in Hollywood, especially given the
Mm-hmm.
leftism. You can make the
Right.
argument of like the left is actually the racist ones. It's, you know, that because they're so worried about it instead of just treating you like the individual.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know how you would break that ceiling. I think it's just it
Yeah.
ultimately takes time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, you know, just outbreed your opponent or
Um,
mix, and then, you know, there's no opponent.
right. So,
Yeah, actually, I have a better answer. Kind of what I was
sure.
trying to get at, and I was lost.
Go for it. You're
Did you ever
good.
see about Scarlett Johansson in her, like,
Yes,
she was supposed to be
I
like, what
did.
I think it's called Rub and Tug. I don't know if it's based on a true story, but she's going to play
Yeah.
a trans man. I always get
Mhm.
confused because she's a woman
Right.
playing a man, but they're trans. Yeah,
Right.
always get
Yeah.
confused with that stuff. But you know, she's an actress and she got chased off.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
and some people's reasons like, well, even if an actual trans person sucked at acting, they should get it because they're trans. It's like, well, that defeats the whole
Mm.
purpose of acting.
Right.
Aside the point, though,
Yeah.
kind of like we were talking about earlier, where I think minorities can be used as shields to deflect criticism. I think it's definitely been
Hmm.
utilized with like the Star Wars argument. Um,
Yeah.
I think trying to like just add diversity for diversity's sake only
Right.
hinders the minorities though long term, because if whites and or males are your main demographic and you try to do minorities and women
Hmm.
without the talent or something, and then, you know, they're there to be criticized for how good they did, you just make people more angry, and it becomes internalized as like, oh, look, there's another Asian, you know, and that can be self-defeating for the legitimate criticism of like diversity hire kind of rhetoric. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, ultimately, like, it just makes people, you know, like, as a mixed guy, like, I've never grown up thinking, I need to see X on screen. I need to see a bisexual person on screen. I
Right.
just want to see good stories.
Hmm.
Um, But now, with like I see castings like Zoe
Mhm.
Kravitz as Catwoman. I know there's been other black Catwomans. That's fine.
Mhm.
Um, but in the state we're in, I'm just like, oh, great. Did they cast a black person because diversity? Is this some shield,
Mhm.
or is it she
Right.
legitimately a good actress? That's what's kind of
Right.
being engendered. That's what I'm getting at, where
Mhm.
you just kind of make people shut off because you've forced it
Yes.
instead of exemplifying a person that has the chops for it. I think Desi really has the chops for her role.
Mhm.
I partially because of Ethan and Skyward. I like Rose Tico. I like Kelly Marie Tran. Some of it's kind of trolly or humor or whatever, but she seems like a nice person. She was just given an
Mhm.
awful character to not
Mhm.
really like.
Right.
Finn was
Yeah.
amazing in the first one.
Mhm.
He had such a good
Right.
role, and then it's like uh, this is the ultimate thing. All right, talking about race and stuff in
Right.
Last Jedi.
Mhm.
Everyone at Disney and Lucasfilm does diversity stuff. They're worried about diversity, and yet every character that has important decisions for the plot or for the saga are white people. Luke Skywalker,
Mhm.
Carrie Fisher,
Right.
Snoke, who's Andy Serkis, a white guy,
Yeah.
Laura Dern playing
Mhm.
Holdo. They put all the minorities in one little subplot that didn't matter because they're failures, and it's like, what does that mean? you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I see it's like you just like you made this a point, but then you put all the minorities, and it's just self defeating. Just make good
Right.
characters.
Gotcha. Uh-huh.
All the white
No,
guys
I
though, like
understand.
Spawn.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So we're almost through. Let's see. So number 16 is in The Mandalorian. The titular character is played by a Hispanic man, but as the character never removes his helmet, would the presence of minority in this instance, or like a similar instance, like playing an alien or something, would that matter to the fandom menace, or is it just the present, the presentation of X amount of minorities, or is that totally off the mark,
I don't think it would matter. Like we knew Pedro Pascal. We didn't know that there was going to be this helmet role. So we knew
Right.
Pedro Pascal from Game of Thrones, Hispanic guy, was playing a Star Wars lead, and we were
Yeah.
excited. It's like, whoa, the Game of Thrones guy. He didn't get enough time in the show. So I
Yeah.
think the question's kind of already answered from the beginning because people were already interested, if hesitantly interested, because it's like it's a new product. Maybe it's not woke or
Right.
just crappy, not respecting war. All those
Uh,
things in one. Um, yeah, it would depend. Like if you got Jenny McCarthy as a character, like I'll give her a fair crack. I'll give Leslie Jones a fair crack, even though she's said all these things to like make us not like her because of identity politics. Um,
mhm.
it's case by
Yeah.
case. Uh, the Cara Dune lady, Gina Carano, people
Mhm.
generally liked her. The complaint was really just could a woman kick a Mandalorian's ass in his Beskar armor, including his helmet? That was the question. I'm of
Mhm.
the state where I'm just like, I don't want to buy into everything's woke, so I had to put like not woke in my review just so people knew like I'm not getting on this.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so the last question is, now that the final installment in the canon Star Wars series is coming out in just a few days now, what will the Fandom Menace focus their efforts on next, if
Um,
anything?
I don't know. I've been putting off writing a kind of Pascal's wager for the Phantom Menace, and it's not that I'm going to leave the Phantom Menace or anything. Like I'm Phantom Menace. It's not a hashtag. It is a group. It's a collective of general thought about a few things. Mainly
Right.
keep divisive politics out of escapism.
Mhm. Got it.
So I don't see why I would ever leave that group.
Mhm.
Where it'll go, I think Star Wars generally is, even if it becomes more for like the mindless masses and not respecting or building lore,
Mhm.
I think they've learned their lesson and they're going to try to just make family fun, family stories and stuff, and not do
Right.
whatever it was with this trilogy, especially
Gotcha.
eight. And so with that, I think Star Wars is going to be in a pretty good place. I think channels that, regardless if they actually are or not, They've left the reputation of just being negative, just saying woke, 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 whammon, all those little buzzwords, SJW this.
Right.
To whatever degree, there will be a falling for sure still for all time, but people are going to just unclench their fists because the trilogy's done. Star Wars is going, in a direction where it's like people are generally happy. Bottom is going to fall out for a lot of channels that just were hate channels. I don't think anyone in the fans is actually hate channels, but there's that perception, and people aren't going to they're going to try to adjust, and it's not going to work. They're with Star Wars, be happy, and it's like, well, I was angry the whole time, and now this guy I follow is happy. Screw him. Or they'll shift to a different, like Marvel's kind of tangential because of Disney, but they'll switch to maybe Planet of the Apes out of nowhere because Disney's rebooting, it's not continuing Planet of the Apes. And it's like, you were never an Apes channel, now you're just jumping on a bandwagon or trying to build one. There'll be that, at least here and there, that people will spot and like, eh. So, yeah, I think the way it looks with Star Wars, it'll hurt the Phantom Menace as far as like growth or sub count views or all that stuff, but we'll see. Like me, I'm not going anywhere. This is a hobby, just got monetized, but I don't really expect anything out of it with that access. It's just, this is a hobby. I care about what I've been doing for almost 2 years now. Like, I'm here to talk about film mainly, and these political discussions, whatever, like, because they've made it part of the discussion. I really just love critiquing and like giving insight that I can find to aid people's experience the next movie. Like, oh, I remember this, and I saw it in that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a great response. And thank you so much again, Angus, for joining me. Seriously, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. I hope it's cool that it was definitely just an interview. Like, I don't know if, you were hoping for anything like a discussion or something. I didn't really like share a whole lot on my end, but if you'd like my opinion on stuff, I don't mind sharing that at all. It's just totally up to you. I just didn't want to like make it something like a debate or a discussion when I definitely framed it an interview. So
yeah, I don't mind. Like sometimes you get to a point where, at least for me, I just like, all right, we just disagree. Like there was there's a 501st issue with a parody art made by a Fandom Menacer, and I've been fully supportive of parody. I know people viewed it like, well, this is a charity, this isn't cool. I'm like, it's art, so whatever.
Right.
But yeah, like there's a guy with this topic, especially Darth Lunga. Shout out to you if you ever watch this. He's in the Great Order from like Den of Nerds, and he has his grade council. We have discussions where we're just like, we're at a standstill, disagree, but we respect each other. We're coming from different angles, and we're trying to benefit each other or change, maybe change each other, but at the end, just perspective. So that's what I'm here for, and I think it's good that you're here to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think it's good to hear the other side, because otherwise, we're just shouting into the void. Nothing's going to change. Nobody's going to progress. Nobody's going to learn anything. And there's just going to be more cancel culture nonsense. And we definitely don't need any more of that with today's society. The media does tend to exaggerate and kind of pit us against each other, and I would love to see an end to that. So, so you being on our channel today have helped in that. I think so. I really appreciate it, for sure. So,
people take it otherwise, but yeah, because it's short, I appreciate it. I'll get with you about having you on a panel and your guys as well. Sure.
I really appreciate it. Have a good one. Bye.